She's 13, lives in a dockside shack, and sketches shipping routes with rope by lantern light when Harvard's top expert mocks her as a clueless dock kid. Hannah quietly rewrites a 2B mistake, driven by one goal, saving her dad's job. But when they accuse her of cheating, will truth be enough? Her frayed rope holds more than knots. It holds everything. The wind off the Portland docks carried salt, diesel, and the slow groan of shifting cargo. At 5:12 each morning, the alarm didn't ring in the shack beside the water. It coughed. An old wind-up clock, missing its back plate, rattled awake like it was struggling to hold on. So did Hannah. She sat up slowly on the cot she shared with her dad, brushing hair from her eyes. Her knees hit a coil of rope on the floor, and she instinctively reached down, looping it once around her hand. The rope wasn't for fishing, not anymore. It was her notebook now. "Hannah," her father mumbled, voice thick with sleep and sea water. "You don't have to be up yet." "I know." Her voice was soft but steady. "I just had an idea about that bottleneck between Osaka and Anchorage." Her dad blinked at her through the dim light. "That again?" "Just one more sketch." The shack's table was barely a table, a crate with a board on top. Her maps were taped to the wall, some drawn on the backs of delivery menus and torn shipping invoices. She pulled a pencil from a chipped mug and began threading the rope across the map like a ship tracing its path through fog. The rope was old, frayed at the ends, but it helped her see what the math couldn't, how the angles tightened where the tension pulled. Her eyes flicked across distance markers and tide annotations. She whispered, "Too much westward drift. That's what's backing up the lane." Behind her, her dad had already drifted back to sleep. He worked the late shift now, unloading freighters for half pay since the layoffs, the same layoffs that had taken most of the crew, and almost took him. The shack shuddered as a container dropped onto a truck somewhere down the dock. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tightened the loop and made a note on the margin of a calendar. Try alternate through Aleutians. Less wind? It was 5:29 a.m. By 6, she was sweeping the wharf office where her dad sometimes filled in. The manager, a red-faced man named Burke, rarely looked at her. "You missed a spot yesterday," he barked. Hannah didn't reply. She just swept, dusting around the computers she wasn't allowed to touch, but watched every time they blinked. One screen showed an interactive route planner, blinking red around the North Pacific corridor. Burke muttered, "System's jammed again. Stupid algorithm can't sort 2 routes without flipping the stack." She paused, then, without thinking, said, "The algorithm probably isn't considering night wind shear over Kamchatka. That's what's throwing the curve off." Burke turned. "What did you just say?" I just meant," she clutched her broom. "The wind patterns. It shifts the shipping lane subtly, makes the system think there's a bottleneck when there's actually clearance." He stared. "You read those maps?" "Every day," she said. I'm just trying to help." He scoffed. "You're the dock kid with the rope drawings. What, you gonna fix a billion-dollar traffic jam with twine?" She didn't answer. That night, back in the shack, her father set down a thermos and leaned against the wall. "Burke told me what happened." Hannah looked up from her map. "You're not in trouble," he added. "But next time, maybe don't talk so loud." He didn't believe me anyway. Her dad's hands were calloused, trembling just slightly as he sat beside her. You know, your mother used to say, when you've got the answer, it doesn't matter if the room's laughing. Say it anyway. Hannah nodded slowly. Her pencil scratched on the edge of the paper. She drew a spiral, tight at the center, spreading outward. A storm system maybe, or something else. Look what I found, Dad. He leaned in. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. A storm outside rattled the windows, but inside the frayed rope lay across the map like a question mark, and Hannah was about to answer it. Hannah pressed the frayed rope into a new loop, tracing a path across her map. The lantern flickered behind her, shadows dancing like ships on choppy water. Her dad was already gone, called in early to help unload a freighter flagged for routing errors. Again, she folded the calendar scrap where she'd sketched the Kamchatka drift, tucked it under a tin cup, and pulled on her boots. By 7, she was at the port's small community library, 2 blocks from the docks, always cold, always empty this early. But it had Wi-Fi and a printer that mostly worked if you whispered to it. She tapped the keyboard. North Pacific route delays. Dozens of articles popped up. One headline caught her eye. Harvard algorithm team faces setback on 2B ocean freight model. Her mouth went dry. She clicked. It wasn't just the dock, global congestion. A new routing algorithm had been launched 6 months ago, designed by Harvard's Supply Chain Dynamics Lab. It was meant to streamline everything. Instead, it was failing badly. One paragraph stopped her cold. Despite internal debate, Professor Erwin Monroe insists the model needs minor adjustment, not revision. Critics say the algorithm's flawed approach to variable current drift is to blame. Hannah whispered, "He's not listening." Her pencil scratched notes on a receipt. The spiral she drew the night before, now she saw it everywhere. In the charts, in the delays, in the wind pattern. She'd watched on the harbor since she was 7. And that's when she heard them. 2 men in suits stepped into the library's back conference room. One was tall, with silver hair. The other wore a Harvard crest on his laptop bag. The librarian offered them coffee. They declined. "We're holding the press line, but only for 48 hours, the Harvard man said. "We need a fix," said the other. "Monroe's credibility is at stake. Half the board's ready to walk. His refusal to consider external input is the problem. He won't listen to anyone without a degree." They shut the door, but not before a folder slipped from the Harvard man's bag. It slid across the floor, landing just shy of Hannah's boot. She bent down slowly. It was open. A diagram poked out. She saw it in one glance. It was her spiral, or something trying to be, but it was wrong. The spiral was overcalculated, based on ideal wind velocity and static wave pressure. It didn't account for what every dock worker knew. Real water didn't move like that. The librarian returned. "Miss, you all right?" Hannah nodded, handing back the folder before anyone noticed. But the spiral, her spiral, burned into her mind. That night, she skipped dinner. Her dad came in with fish and chips, whistling low. "Boss said they're rerouting us again. Can't keep a schedule for anything these days." Hannah didn't look up. She whispered, "I heard something I can't ignore." Her dad sat, still holding the greasy paper bag. "You hear trouble?" She nodded. "They're blaming the wrong part of the model. I saw it. It's built wrong." He placed the bag down. "Hannah, these are Harvard people. They don't want help from a kid with rope and receipts. But they need it." She unrolled a page of recycled paper, taped together from scraps of old shipping invoices. On it, she'd redrawn their spiral, but adjusted. "Look," she said, pointing. "The drift increases at night because of wind channeling. That's why their lanes jam. Not because of error, but because they're too perfect. They're ignoring the real sea." Her dad studied it. "You sure?" "I've watched that water since I was 5. I'm more than sure." He leaned back. "Then we've got to find someone who will listen." She held up the rope. "It's all here. I just have to show them." But as she said it, the lantern died, out of fuel. Her symbol, her frayed rope, hung limp in her hand. She stared at it in the dark, heart pounding. They wouldn't believe her, but maybe, just maybe, they couldn't afford not to. It was past midnight when Hannah stood in the alley behind the wharf's loading dock, clutching her rope like a lifeline. The power in the shack was out again. The lantern was dry. Her dad was asleep on the cot, exhausted from a double shift. So she lit a candle, set it on a crate, and unrolled her maps beside a pile of crates and rusted chains. Fog crept in from the water, cold, bit at her fingers. But her mind was burning. "I see it differently now," she whispered. She spread the rope across her map, one loop at a time. It was nothing like what the Harvard model had shown. They'd built their system on formulas and forecasts. Hannah built hers on wind, tide, and instinct, on things you could feel beneath your feet, not just calculate in a lab. She took a broken pencil from her coat pocket. The tip was cracked, but she didn't care. She scribbled margin notes around the rope's path. "Ships are drifting 6 miles east by hour 9, she muttered. "But they course correct too late. That's the bottleneck." The wind picked up. Her candle flickered. She grabbed a rusted fishing weight, held down the map's edge, and looped the rope tighter. Suddenly, she paused. Something clicked. She stepped back and stared at the rope pattern she'd just made. It wasn't straight. It was jagged, tight at the turns, loose at the ends. But when she traced it in her mind, it reminded her of something. Her heartbeat quickened. She ripped a receipt from her pocket, flipped it over, and drew 2 spirals side by side, one smooth, one irregular. Then she drew a line through both. "Their algorithm forces perfection," she said aloud. "But perfection delays correction. Mine lets ships drift early and fix sooner." It was the opposite of what the experts expected. The insight jolted her. She dropped the pencil. Her system worked because it allowed error. It planned for failure and turned it into flow. She ran inside the shack and woke her dad. "Hannah," he mumbled, rubbing his face, "it's 2 a.m. Dad, I need your help. I need nails and wood and about 20 feet of rope." He blinked. "We fixing the roof or building a revolution?" She grinned. "Both." By dawn, the alley behind the shack had transformed. With wooden crates as support and nails hammered into plywood, Hannah had recreated her route model in full scale. Ropes snaked from peg to peg, showing the spiral, the drift, and the correction points. She'd built a shipping lane you could walk through. Her dad stood back, arms crossed, eyes wide. "This is incredible. It's real, she said, and it works. But just as she stepped forward to tighten one of the loops, the nail snapped. The rope slipped. The whole model lurched sideways. She froze. The weight of it hit her. She wasn't a professor. She didn't have degrees or titles, just rope, a broken pencil, and a dock worker's last paycheck holding the roof over their heads. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispered. Her dad didn't speak at first. Then he knelt beside her, picked up the loose rope, and held it out. "You're not," he said. "I've worked these waters 30 years. I've never seen anyone read them like you do." She took the rope from him, fingers trembling. "Fix it," he said gently. "Show them what they missed." She nodded. By sunrise, the model stood complete, and at the center, pinned to a crate with a rusted fishhook, hung her broken pencil, tip worn to wood, but still pointed toward the sea. It wasn't perfect, but neither was the ocean, and that was the point. The auditorium was packed. Students filled every seat. Professors lined the walls, and at the front of the stage stood Professor Erwin Monroe, gray hair, pressed suit, and a face that looked like it had never been wrong. Hannah stood at the back, rope model in hand, her dad beside her, holding the broken pencil in his coat pocket like it meant something sacred. The invite hadn't been formal. It had come through Burke, the dock manager whose cousin worked custodial at the university. He'd whispered to Hannah, "Monroe's speaking tomorrow. If you want to be heard, that's your chance." So here they were. Hannah gripped her model tighter. Monroe cleared his throat. "As I was saying, despite minor turbulence in the Pacific, the algorithm is not at fault. Operators are overreacting." Murmurs in the crowd. Some nodded, some frowned. Hannah stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." The room turned. Monroe squinted. "Who? Are you lost, young lady?" "No, sir," Hannah said. "I have a model that might explain the drift you're seeing." Someone in the back snickered. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Hannah Marks, from Portland. I built it using rope and tide data. I think your algorithm doesn't account for—" "Rope?" he repeated, cutting her off. "You're basing maritime logistics on dock rope?" She swallowed. "It's more accurate than you think. I modeled the drift using—" He chuckled. "Let me guess. You've got a notebook full of chicken scratches and a magic fishhook?" More laughter. Hannah's face flushed. "I have real data. I've mapped the drift through the Kamchatka corridor using—" "You're a dock kid," Monroe snapped. "Not an engineer. Let's not pretend." Silence. For a second, even the laughter stopped. Hannah's dad took a step forward, but she put a hand on his arm. "I didn't come here to pretend," she said quietly. "I came here because people are losing jobs. My dad almost did. Because of that algorithm." Monroe crossed his arms. "Young lady, you're trespassing on a professional discussion." "Then challenge me," Hannah said. "Let me prove it. If I'm wrong, I'll leave." The room buzzed. Monroe raised a brow. "You want a challenge?" She nodded. He turned to the screen, tapped the podium. "Fine. The simulation module is open. Find a better route using your—" "Fishing line." Her hands trembled, but she stepped forward. The screen glowed, waiting. She reached into her jacket, pulled out the recycled paper with her spiral sketched across it. Her dad slipped her the broken pencil. "Don't let them rattle you," he whispered. "The rope's not wrong." The crowd leaned in. She traced it in a spiral, punched coordinates into the simulation, then adjusted for wind drift manually. Monroe's eyebrows raised. She could feel his doubt like a spotlight, hot on the back of her neck. She's not even using code, a grad student said. She's drawing. On paper, another laughed. What is this, 1910? But then, the red markers under the screen turned green. The congested corridor cleared. The room fell silent. Monroe stepped forward slowly, reading the projection. He said nothing, but a woman near the wall, young, wearing a staff badge, spoke. She didn't just clear the route, she said. She optimized it, cut 7 hours off total cargo time. Gasps. Monroe turned back to Hannah, but he didn't smile. He didn't clap. Instead, he said, even broken clocks are right twice a day. And with that, he walked off the stage. The audience didn't know what to do. Some clapped, hesitant. Others whispered. The young woman who'd spoken earlier approached. I'm Claire, she said softly. Teaching assistant. That was real? Hannah nodded. They laughed, but I won't let it stop. Claire handed her a card. Call me. Not everyone in this place walks with their nose in the air. Hannah smiled. She walked out with her robe still looped, the broken pencil back in her pocket, and the recycled paper creased but not torn. They hadn't believed her. Not yet, but the model had. The door slammed behind her. Hannah stood in the center of Professor Monroe's private conference room, walls lined with awards, sea charts in gold frames, and a whiteboard filled with equations written in sharp, perfect lines. Monroe paced slowly, his hands behind his back. You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues, he said without looking at her. And worse, you made people think you were right. Hannah didn't speak. Her fingers found the edge of the recycled paper folded in her jacket. He turned to her. So here's what we're going to do. Since you believe your little rope trick is superior, I'm giving you a chance. One chance. She blinked. What kind of chance? Monroe stepped closer, eyes narrowed. You get 24 hours. You'll receive the same data packet we're working with. If you can produce a solution better than ours by tomorrow morning, you can stay. If not, you leave. For good. A quiet beat. Then he added, fail, and you'll never set foot in this building again. Hannah's throat tightened. Understood? She nodded. Yes, sir. Monroe handed her a folder, thick and stamped with the university seal. Good luck, he said, though there was no kindness in it. She turned to leave, heart pounding, hands already sweating against the folder's edge. As she stepped into the hallway, Claire, Monroe's assistant, was waiting. He's serious, Claire said. You really only have tonight. I'll show him, Hannah said quietly. I don't need all night. Claire looked at her, then handed over a USB stick. This has the backup wind field overlays, she whispered. They're not in the official file, but they matter. Hannah's eyes widened. Why are you helping me? Claire smiled, tired and a little sad. Because no one helped me when I was the kid in the back who wasn't supposed to be here either. That night, Hannah spread the pages across a borrowed study room floor. No computer, no printer, just Claire's old desk lamp, her rope, the broken pencil, and her father's toolbox of rusted nails and thumbtacks. I can't mess this up, she whispered. Her dad stepped in with 2 sandwiches and a thermos. You've got this, he said. Just do it like you always do. Build it. I only have one night. That's more than you've ever had before. She nodded, took a deep breath, then began. She tacked paper to the wall, looped rope around thumbtacks to simulate wind shear, marked tide shifts in pen, and weighted her models with the same rusted fishhooks she'd used since she was 10. As the hours passed, she redrew everything from scratch. Her fingers bled from the rope burn. Her pencil wore to nothing, but she kept writing with what was left, dragging it sideways across the page. By 3:17 a.m., she collapsed against the wall, eyes burning, model complete. But then, a breeze swept through the cracked window. The corner of her spiral lifted. The paper trembled. She lunged. Too late. It tore. The entire eastern corridor she'd mapped fluttered to the floor, soaked by her spilled thermos. Her breath caught. No, 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 no. She grabbed the ruined sheet, tried to smooth it, but the ink had bled. The spiral was gone. She stared at the mess, at the clock, at the empty stub of her pencil. A single tear slid down her cheek. She almost gave up, but then her fingers brushed something in her jacket pocket. The broken pencil, still there, still pointed forward. She pulled it out, found one last blank scrap of paper, and began to redraw. From memory, from instinct, from years of standing at the harbor's edge, watching the waves do what computers never could. At sunrise, she stood in the hallway outside Monroe's door. She had no polished charts, just recycled paper, rope, and a spiral drawn in pencil so faint it shimmered like wind. He opened the door. "You're early." She met his gaze. "I finished." He looked at her hands, ink-stained, shaking, then down at her model, and he said nothing. Not yet. The lights in the supply closet buzzed overhead, flickering, faint. Hannah sat cross-legged on the cold tile floor, surrounded by cleaning rags, old textbooks, and half-used printer paper pulled from the recycle bin. She didn't belong in a lab, so she made one. Her rope spiral was tacked to the wall with bent staples. She had no graphing software, no multi-core processor, just a frayed ball of a string and her pencil, shaved down to the metal band. Claire knocked softly and entered, holding a cup of tea. "This is where you're working?" Hannah nodded without looking up. They locked the classroom. "I found this instead." Claire crouched beside her, setting the tea down. "It smells like bleach." "It smells like effort." Claire smiled faintly. "You could have walked away." Hannah finally looked at her. "I won't give up." She pointed to the paper lining the wall. "They want the smooth routes, but ships don't move in smooth lines. They adapt. They breathe." Claire watched her loop the rope between pins. "This part here," Hannah said, "is where most of their congestion builds. But if I simulate the wind drift and allow correction before pressure peaks." "You release the tension early," Claire finished. "Exactly." The heater clanked above them. The closet fell silent. Hannah reached for her pencil, but it cracked in her hand. The tip gave out. She stared at it, breath catching. Claire reached into her pocket. "Here." She handed over a pen. Nothing special, just blue ink with the words "Property of Harvard" printed on the side. Hannah hesitated. "I've only ever used a pencil." Claire smiled. "Then maybe it's time you finish this with something that doesn't break." Hannah took it, and she wrote, line by line, curve by curve. She adjusted the angles of her rope, added weight to simulate cargo mass shifts, calculated energy losses in her head. Her brain burned, Her hands cramped, but she didn't stop. Her dad showed up around midnight. He stood in the doorway, silent, watching her sketch on the wall. She didn't see him at first. When she finally looked up, he was smiling. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to know you're not sleeping again tonight." She chuckled. "I'm close." He stepped inside, picked up a fallen sheet. "This the route you're trying to fix?" She nodded. "There's a pressure pocket that builds if the crosswinds shift too early, it backs everything up." He studied the curve. "What if," he said slowly, "the first turn adjusted just a few degrees left? Wouldn't that move the break point farther out?" Hannah froze. She rushed to the rope model and tested it. It worked. "You're a genius," she whispered. Her dad shrugged. "I just load ships. You're the one who sees the current." "No," she said. "You felt it. That's the difference." Together, they stayed up another hour, adjusting weights, shifting angles, redrawing the outer corridor. And then it happened. The breakthrough. One simple loop, a new spiral within the original, smaller, tighter, but it relieved all the pressure. The simulated lane cleared in 5 seconds flat. She stepped back, eyes wide. "It's done," she breathed. "It's really done." Her dad wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "You did it." "No," she whispered. "We did." She took the final sketch, folded it carefully, and placed it in the envelope Monroe had given her. Then she tucked the broken pencil inside, as a reminder. The next morning, Hannah stood outside the conference room again, folder in hand, pen in pocket, rope model rolled tight beneath her arm. She looked through the window at Monroe, already lecturing, already dismissing. She exhaled, then walked in. The lecture hall was packed again. Only this time, they weren't here for Monroe. They were here for the girl with rope. Hannah stood at the front of the room, folder in hand, eyes on the floor. Her recycled paper was laid out beside the digital projection screen. Her rope model coiled beside her like a sleeping question. Monroe sat in the front row, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Claire stood in the wings, watching nervously. Professor Halbert from MIT was present. So was a rep from the Port Authority. Someone whispered that even the governor's logistics advisor had slipped in through the back. Hannah stepped forward. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said softly. "I don't have credentials. I don't know the algorithms the way you do." A pause. "But I know the water." She unrolled the rope slowly, anchoring the corners with pins, the center with a rusted fishhook. She drew the spiral again on the whiteboard, freehand, pen, moving with quiet certainty. "The original system assumed ships move like lines," she continued. "They don't. They twist. They hesitate. The sea pushes them, pulls them." She clicked the projector. A simulation appeared, red congestion flooding the North Pacific corridor. Then she entered her coordinates. The audience leaned in. Green, the red vanished, one line at a time, like dominoes falling. Someone in the back gasped. Monroe stood abruptly. "What adjustments did you make?" She turned to face him. "I allowed for early drift," she said. "Your model resists it. Mine builds for it. The tension resolves sooner." He blinked. "You planned for error?" "I planned for reality." Murmurs swept the hall. Claire stepped up beside her. She just cleared $2 billion in freight backlog, Claire said, voice steady, with rope and recycled paper. Halberd pushed his glasses up. Let me see the physical model. Hannah nodded and gestured to the rope laid out on the table. He stepped forward, examined the angles. This curve, this loop anticipates pressure 6 hours before the forecast predicts it, he said. That's not reactive routing. That's proactive design. He turned. I never saw that coming. Monroe said nothing, but his jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he walked to the board, stared at her drawing. His eyes narrowed. This violates standard procedural constraints, he muttered. It's completely unorthodox. It works, Hannah said. He turned to her. You tested this? She pulled out the folder, her notes, her hand-drawn maps. At the very top, taped to the inside cover, was the broken pencil, worn down, splintered, and pointing at the equations. I didn't just test it, she said. I lived it. Monroe scanned the notes in silence. His fingers paused on a rope loop diagram with pressure differentials scribbled in blue ink. Halberd leaned closer. This approach could be applied across 6 other global shipping lanes, he said. It's not just a fix. It's a new framework. The room exploded in whispers. Claire smiled, but Monroe slammed the folder shut. It's still unvetted. It needs peer review. Protocol. Claire stepped forward. Then let's give it one. From the back of the room, a quiet voice spoke. I'll co-author. Everyone turned. It was Dr. Leland, senior logistics consultant, retired Navy. No one had seen him in a Harvard room in years. I've been following this case, he said, and she's right. I've seen these currents up close. Her model mirrors reality better than any simulation I've reviewed in 20 years. He looked at Monroe. And if you don't publish this, I will. Silence. Then someone clapped, then another. The hall filled with applause. Monroe sat down, silent. Hannah looked at her dad in the back row. He held up a small object, her broken pencil, between 2 fingers like a medal. She smiled. I did it, she whispered, not to brag, but to breathe. The applause faded, but Hannah didn't move. She stood at the front of the lecture hall, the folder still in her hands, the broken pencil still taped inside. The model was complete. The numbers had spoken, but she hadn't. Not yet. Claire stepped beside her and gently asked, You okay? Hannah nodded. Her voice was quiet. There's something I need to say. The room hushed again. She turned to face them, not just Monroe, not just the scholars or students, but all of them. My name is Hannah Marks. I live in a shack near the docks in Portland. My dad works freighters. He's worked them since he was 16. She paused, eyes glistening. A year ago, he got laid off for 3 months because of route delays no one could explain. We couldn't make rent. We patched the roof with fishing tarps, and he still got up at 4 every morning just in case someone needed help unloading. She held up the spiral sketch. This wasn't about proving anything to you. Then she raised the folder. This was about saving him. Monroe leaned back, arms still folded, silent. Hannah's voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. My dad used to trace shipping maps with his finger right on the kitchen wall. He'd say, You follow the current, not the forecast. I started doing the same with rope. She smiled faintly. I thought it was a game, Claire whispered. It never was. Hannah nodded. One night he came home limping. A crate had fallen. They didn't have enough crew. I was angry. I asked why he didn't quit. Her voice dropped. He said, "Because you need to see me stand." She looked down at the folder again, fingers brushing the pencil. "I'm standing now because he never stopped." A pause. No one spoke. Even Monroe lowered his eyes. From the back row, her dad stood slowly. He didn't speak either, but he raised a small item above his head, a folded piece of recycled paper, one corner stained with grease. It was her first sketch, the very first spiral she'd ever drawn. She gasped, "I thought I lost that." "You left it in my jacket pocket," he said. "I kept it." She took a step toward him. "This is for you," she said, her voice trembling. "For all the nights you didn't eat so I could study. For every shift you worked with a pulled shoulder. For that roof you fixed with fishing line. For standing." Her dad's eyes glistened. "I'm proud of you, Hannah." She closed her eyes. The folder shook slightly in her hands. And then someone in the audience stood up. A woman in a dark blazer, notebook tucked under her arm. "I work with maritime labor unions," she said. "I've reviewed countless models. But yours? It shows something else. Human tension, human timing." She walked forward and pointed to the spiral. "This curve here, this isn't math, it's memory." She turned to Hannah. "And it might save lives." Someone else stood, then another, and another, until nearly half the room was on its feet, not applauding, just standing. Like her father. Claire leaned close. "You just changed more than routes." Hannah exhaled. Her shoulders dropped. She opened the folder, removed the broken pencil, and held it in the light. It wasn't just splintered wood. It was a record of every night she could have given up, of every hour she didn't. And still, it pointed forward, always forward. The next morning, Hannah returned to campus with her folder pressed tight to her chest. But something felt different. Students avoided her gaze. Professors whispered behind half-closed doors. One man glanced at her, then turned away as if burned. Claire met her at the top of the marble stairwell, eyes sharp. "They're calling a review panel," she said. "It's not official yet, but the word's spreading." Hannah frowned. "For what?" "They're saying you cheated." Hannah's jaw dropped. "Cheated?" Claire nodded grimly. "Anonymous complaints, claims that someone else, maybe even your father, fed you classified data." "But I worked from scratch. You saw." "They don't care," Claire said. "They're scared. You proved them wrong in front of everyone." They walked into the main hall. A sign taped to the door read, "Study room closed for investigation." Hannah stared at it. "That's where I worked." "I know." Claire pulled it down, crumpled it. "They can't erase you." But Hannah stepped back. "They're trying." A voice called from across the atrium. It was Professor Monroe. "Miss Marks?" He stood tall in his usual pressed blazer, but his eyes were heavy. "The faculty has requested an inquiry. Your presentation's been suspended from publication." Claire stepped forward. "You saw her work. You saw the model." Monroe didn't blink. "This isn't about the model. It's about the method." Hannah's hands tightened around the folder. "You mean it's about me?" Monroe paused. "No official degree, no peer review history, no published credentials." "I have a broken pencil and a dock map," she said. "That's my credential." He tilted his head. "We all answer to someone, Miss Marks, even you." She stared at him. "They can take the room. They can question the data. But they don't get to erase what happened in that hall yesterday." Her voice rose. They don't get to erase the jobs this might save. Students had gathered now, watching, listening. Monroe shifted uncomfortably. Claire spoke again. She didn't fake her way in. She built her way in, one pin, one spiral, one sleepless night at a time. Monroe turned. If the data holds, it will survive a scrutiny. Hannah stepped forward. Then let it. She handed him the folder. Inside was every page, every loop, every hand-drawn chart marked in pen and recycled paper. At the back, she had taped something new. The broken pencil, now wrapped in a torn shipping label that read, "Handle with care." Monroe hesitated. "What is this?" "Proof," she said, "that I didn't come here with polished slides. I came with the truth." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took the folder, tucked it under his arm, and walked away. Claire exhaled. "You did good." "I'm not sure it matters." "It will," Claire said. Just then, a student from the crowd stepped forward. Tall, nervous. "I saw your model," he said. "Last week, I watched my dad lose a root job over those delays. They told him it was system failure. But your map, your spiral, explains exactly what went wrong." Hannah blinked. He offered a folded paper. "I printed your model from a screen grab." He cried when he saw it, said no one ever listened to the crew. She took the paper slowly. Her own spiral stared back at her, low resolution, pixelated, but still hers. Claire placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." Hannah looked around, at the locked room, at the quiet stairs, at the symbol in her pocket. They could close every door, but they couldn't close the sea. And they couldn't unmake what she'd drawn with nothing but rope, recycled paper, and the pencil no one thought would write a future. A cold wind swept through the campus courtyard as students gathered outside the main lecture building. Flyers taped to lampposts read, "Review hearing, room 201, public welcome." Inside, the room was tense. Faculty lined one side. Monroe sat stiffly, arms folded, while Dr. Leland stood near the center with a small display table and Hannah's folder in hand. Claire was beside him, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. Hannah sat in the front row, her father behind her, hands on her shoulders. The committee chair cleared his throat. Due to multiple allegations questioning the origin of this model, today's hearing will focus on source verification and process integrity. Monroe leaned forward. With respect, her data was gathered unsupervised, unrecorded. That alone warrants scrutiny. Dr. Leland stepped up. "Then let's scrutinize." He opened the folder, revealing Hannah's recycled paper sketches, each one numbered. Some stained, others folded, one torn from the corner of a shipping invoice. "These aren't digital files, copied from a lab," he said. "They're working notes, created under pressure, annotated in sequence. Most importantly, they reflect iterative design." Claire stepped forward and unwrapped the brown paper, revealing a cardboard panel covered in shipping tags, each pinned with red thread and notations. "This was found in the supply closet where she worked," she said. Each tag corresponds to wind drift readings pulled from public maritime trackers. Times and currents align with exact corrections she submitted. The crowd stirred. A young faculty member squinted. How do we know she didn't have help? Claire didn't answer. She simply pulled out a video. Footage played on the wall, grainy, time-stamped. It showed Hannah pacing in the dim supply room, taping rope to the wall, redrawing a spirals, flipping through papers by candlelight. Her pencil moved fast, her lips murmuring math. She didn't cheat, Claire said. She lived this. Someone in the back whispered. She built a working model out of trash. Dr. Leland added, and it held under full-scale simulation twice. Monroe's jaw tightened. Fine, he said. Let's see the model under our standard. The projector flashed. Hannah stood. This is my work. She approached the screen, tapped the keys herself, and input the coordinates she had memorized long ago. The simulation loaded. Red, yellow, then green. Cargo routes cleared, pressure points balanced, fuel loads dropped by 6%. The model ran twice. Flawless. The room fell still. A long silence. Then the chair looked at Monroe. Well? Monroe didn't answer. He looked at the screen, then back at Hannah, and finally said, It's functional. Dr. Leland turned. Not just functional, revolutionary. Claire walked to the panel and gently pressed something against it. It was the broken pencil taped at the center. Worn, wood split, barely usable. This, she said, was the only tool she used for the first 10 drafts. It broke. She kept writing. Hannah stepped beside it. I didn't cheat, she said softly. I couldn't. I didn't have access. I didn't even have a room. She looked toward her father. I just had rope and a reason. From the back, applause began. Quiet at first, then louder. Students, dock workers, a few faculty members, even the committee chair nodded slowly. Monroe rose. He looked at Hannah for a long moment, then quietly left the room. Dr. Leland smiled. They can't deny it now. Hannah touched the pencil once more. No, she whispered. They can't. The sun had just dipped behind the chapel spire when Hannah walked across the quiet courtyard, folder tucked under one arm, rope model coiled at her side. She didn't know what to expect. She only knew the message on her phone was short. Meet me in room 304, 6 p.m., Leland. She found the door unlocked. Inside, the room smelled like old paper and pine-scented polish. Maps hung on the walls, real ones, nautical charts, hand-drawn, weathered. A battered compass sat on the desk. Dr. Leland looked up from a stack of reports. You came. Hannah nodded. I thought I might be in trouble. He smiled. Quite the opposite. She stepped inside, hesitant. What is this? He gestured to the desk. I wanted you to see where the real work begins. No cameras, no faculty politics, just ideas. She set the folder down. Leland opened it with care, lifting one sketch, then another. I taught Monroe, he said, 30 years ago, before he wore silk ties and used words like procedural integrity. He looked at her. He used to build models out of shoelaces and chalk. She blinked. What happened? Recognition, he said. It turned some into architects and others into gatekeepers. He slid a document toward her. It had the Harvard crest and her name, Hannah Marks, Honorary Research Fellowship, Applied Systems Modeling. She stared. This is real? He nodded. I pulled every string I had. You'll be assigned a research seat, full access to labs, mentorship from 3 senior faculty, and most importantly, a stipend. So you don't have to choose between your next sketch and your next meal. She didn't speak. Her hands trembled. You believe in me? Leland leaned back. I watched you draw the ocean from memory, solve what a $10 million algorithm couldn't, and carry your father's story into the heart of this institution. He smiled gently. We'll build this together. She swallowed hard, tears threatening. I don't even know where to start. You already did, he said. He pulled a drawer open and handed her something wrapped in cloth. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a notebook, thick, blank. The first page said, for Hannah, to map what matters. She ran her fingers over the cover. I've only ever worked on scraps. Not anymore. She sat down, still stunned. What if I mess up? He pointed to her folder. You already did. That's why it worked. A knock at the door broke the moment. Claire stepped in, breathless. Sorry I had to come. She held up an envelope. This just came through the Port Union's office.
Perfect.
They want to pilot her model, full integration, starting with westbound lanes from Tokyo. Hannah blinked. They're really using it? Claire nodded. They're calling it the Mark's Flow. Hannah laughed once, quietly, then covered her mouth. My dad won't believe this. Claire grinned. I called him. He's on his way. Leland stood. There's one catch. Hannah looked up. What? You'll need to move into student housing. There's a room waiting, clean bed, your own desk. She hesitated. What about the shack? Leland smiled. It'll still be there, but you don't have to live by the water to remember it. She stood slowly, holding the new notebook, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken pencil, still sharp at the base, but almost out of wood. She placed it on Leland's desk. I think I've earned a new one, she said. He nodded. But keep this close, he said. You may still need to remind them how you got here. She smiled. I'll never forget. Outside, the wind picked up again, and for the first time, Hannah wasn't bracing against it. She was walking into it. The hall was filled with light. Long banners hung from the rafters, deep crimson, stitched with gold. Students and professors filled every row, whispering beneath the buzz of the overhead lights. At the center of it all stood a single wooden podium, freshly polished, flanked by 2 flags and 1 empty chair. Hannah stood just beyond the curtains. She wore a clean white shirt, borrowed slacks, and boots still dusted with harbor silt. In her hands, she clutched the new notebook Dr. Leland had given her. Inside, the first page was blank, but the broken pencil was still in her jacket pocket. Claire appeared beside her, holding a program. Ready? Hannah took a breath. I think so. You earned this. She stepped back as Leland took the stage. The crowd quieted. There are moments in every institution's history, he said, where we are reminded that brilliance does not always come wrapped in polish. Sometimes it arrives with rope burns and recycled paper. A light laugh rippled through the crowd. Leland smiled. Today, we award the first ever undergraduate fellowship in systems navigation to a young woman whose work has already transformed global shipping routes, saved countless jobs, and, though she may not know it, reminded us why we teach. He turned toward the curtain. Hannah Marks, please join us. She stepped out into the light. The applause rose slowly like a wave breaking across the room. A few dock workers in the back row clapped hardest. She spotted her father near the aisle, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Leland offered her the certificate. She stared at it, then whispered, "I don't belong here." He leaned in. "That's exactly why you do." She took it with trembling hands. The applause grew louder. She turned to the mic. "I never thought this day would come," she began, "not because I didn't try, but because I thought no one would ever look in my direction long enough to see." She held up the notebook. "This is the first time I've had clean pages." Then she pulled the pencil from her jacket and held it next to the certificate. "This is what I used to get here." A murmur moved through the audience. She looked out over the rows. "My dad taught me that the ocean doesn't follow predictions. It moves how it wants. And if you want to survive it, you don't fight the drift. You learn to ride it." She paused. "I did this for him, for the workers like him, for the kids sitting in supply closets, sketching answers no one asked them for." She met Monroe's eyes in the third row. He didn't nod, but he didn't look away. And to the students out there who feel invisible, don't wait for permission. Start with what you have, even if it's just a pencil and a reason. Applause thundered. As she walked off a stage, her dad met her at the stairs. He wrapped her in a hug so tight the certificate bent slightly. "You did it," he whispered. She laughed through tears. "We did." He stepped back, pulling something from his coat, a small oil-stained tin box. "What's that?" He opened it. Inside were every scrap of rope she'd ever cut for her maps, every bent pin, every folded note. "I kept everything," he said. "Even that piece you thought blew off the dock." She reached in and pulled out the torn edge of her first spiral, the missing corner. She held it to her chest, then slid it into the back pocket of the new notebook, not as a memory, but as proof. The ocean didn't hand her a future. She built it, one loop at a time. 6 months later, the port looked different. Not bigger, not shinier, but faster. The cranes moved smoother. The container lanes flowed cleaner. And the dock workers, once stranded between delays, were back on schedule, on payroll, and for the first time in a long while, on time for dinner. At the center of it all was a bulletin board nailed to the inside wall of the harbor office. It displayed a single laminated chart. The marks flow, a simplified spiral, redrafted in bright blue lines, titled North Pacific Adaptive Route Map, version 1.3. Below it was a plaque based on the original field model by Hannah Marks. Hannah stood just outside, notebook in hand. Her pencil, new this time, but still chipped from use, scratched a line across page 17. She was sketching updates for the Atlantic lanes. Her dad leaned against the railing beside her. "Can't stop, huh?" She grinned. "The drift doesn't." He nodded toward the harbor. 3 more shifts added this week. That's 74 jobs brought back since your model went live. She looked out across the water. "I did it for them." He studied her face for a moment. "No," he said gently, "you did it as one of them." From behind them, the port manager stepped out. Burke, same red face, but a lot less gruff than before. "You coming in for the vote?" he asked. "Union's naming the new scheduling terminal." Hannah raised a brow. "Me? Not officially," he shrugged. "But you might want to hear what they picked." Inside, the main room was packed. Dock workers, admin staff, a few local business owners all gathered around a sheet of paper taped to the wall. Burke cleared his throat. We had a few ideas. South Pier Control, Lane 3 Hub, even a scheduling A. Groans and chuckles rolled through the room. He pointed to the final line, but the vote wasn't close. He turned the paper around. The spiral. Cheers erupted. Someone whistled. Another clapped her hands and yelled, "About time we named something after the girl who saved our necks." Hannah laughed, cheeks flushed. "You're serious?" Burke nodded. "You turned a $2 billion mess into a working system. You turned lost hours into livable wages. You turned drift into design." Her dad clapped her on the back. "Not bad for a dock kid with a pencil." One of the older workers, beard stained from coffee, stepped forward. "Can I show you something?" He handed her a laminated logbook page. It was from his ship. On the bottom was a hand-drawn spiral. "We run this now. Every shift, even printed it on the bulkheads." Hannah blinked. "You printed my sketch?" He smiled. "It calms the new guys, reminds them we've got direction." She traced the spiral with her finger. It was hers. Imperfect, human, and now a part of the port. Later that evening, back in her new campus room, she opened her notebook. She drew a fresh spiral, smaller, more delicate, one loop at a time. She taped it beside the broken pencil and the torn corner from her first map. A wall of memories now, each symbol pinned with quiet reverence. Then she flipped the page and wrote 4 words. "This is just beginning." The port lights blinked in the distance. The current still pulled, but this time she wasn't bracing, she was leading. The rooftop was quiet, just above the 3rd-floor lab, under a sky smudged with stars. Hannah sat on a rusted vent cover with her knees pulled to her chest. The harbor lights blinked in the distance, like slow, patient code. Her notebook rested open beside her. The wind tugged at the corner of a recycled shipping label she had taped inside. She held the broken pencil in her hands, still sharp, somehow. The rooftop door creaked open. Claire stepped out, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "I figured you'd be up here." Hannah smiled. "I needed air." Claire handed her a cup and sat beside her. "I heard the spirals being integrated into the South Atlantic lanes next month." Hannah nodded. "And the Arctic after that." Claire leaned her head back against the metal railing. "You ever stop to think how strange this is? A kid with rope and a pencil redesigning global logistics?" Hannah exhaled. "Every day." A long silence stretched between them. Then Hannah asked, "What if that was the peak? What if I can't do it again?" Claire didn't answer at first. She took a slow sip of tea, then looked her straight in the eye. "Then do it anyway. Fail out loud. Get it wrong on purpose. You already tore down one system. That's more than most of us ever try." Hannah blinked. Claire added, "You don't have to carry the weight of being right. You just have to keep being you." Hannah looked out toward the dark water. She remembered the sound of her dad's boots in the morning, the way he'd fixed their roof with netting and wire, how he'd carried her a spiral in his coat pocket like a prayer. "You know," she said quietly, "my first rope map, it wasn't supposed to be anything. I was just trying to understand how cargo moved. I didn't think anyone would ever see it." Claire leaned forward. "And now they teach it at Harvard." A quiet laugh escaped Hannah's throat. Then the rooftop door opened again. This time it was her dad, wearing his old harbor jacket, sleeves rolled up, calloused hands still smelling faintly of engine oil. "You weren't going to tell me about the article, were you?" he asked. Hannah tilted her head. "What article?" He held up a printed sheet. "Port Times Weekly, the girl who recharted the world." Hannah groaned, laughing. "I didn't know it was going to run." He sat beside her, unfolding the paper across his knees. "It says you've saved more than 6,000 jobs so far, and that the models projected to prevent over 4 million tons of fuel waste annually." He tapped the corner. "Not bad for a dockside shack kid." Hannah looked down at the broken pencil in her hands. "I kept this," she said. "Even when the tip was gone, I couldn't throw it out. It's like the reminder." Her dad smiled. "That it still works?" She nodded. He pulled something from his coat, a fresh pencil, brand new. He held it out. She didn't take it at first, then slowly she reached for it. "But I'm keeping the old one." He grinned. "I'd be worried if you didn't." Claire looked between them, quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What now, Hannah? What's next?" Hannah looked down at her notebook. The next page was blank. No sketches, no rope, just space. She smiled. "I don't know yet." She flipped the pencil in her hand. "But I think I'm finally ready to write in pen." The three of them sat in silence, watching ships blink far off in the dark. Wind moved around them, but they didn't flinch. And as the moon climbed higher, Hannah whispered, almost to herself, "Talent isn't where you haul, it's where you